Welcome to Top Knot Education, where you get a chapter summary of a classic novel in less time than it takes you to walk to class. Today we'll be talking about Catcher in the Rye, Chapter 18. Holden begins the chapter, of course, by thinking about calling Jane. He wants to take her dancing. He has a memory of Jane dating a dopey guy who jumped off the diving board and did half gainers over and over again. In keeping with the naming puns, his name is Al Pike. Jane told Holden Al was dopey because he had an inferiority complex, and Holden complains that girls like dopey guys and always make excuses for them. Then he complains that if a girl doesn't like you, she won't give you a break for any mistake you make. He actually calls Jane, but she doesn't answer, so he hangs up. Looking through his address book, he decides to call Carl Luce, an old friend from a previous school. Luce was the smartest guy Holden knew at the Wooten School. Luce agrees to meet him later, so Holden has some time to kill. He goes to a movie. First, there's a Christmas performance, and religion once again comes up. Holden remembers taking Sally to something similar, and he complained so much that Sally called him a sacrilegious atheist. Holden says, quote, "Maybe I am," quote. But based on Salinger's descriptions of the event, it seems Holden is more bothered by the phony, silly nature of the performance than anything related to religion. The movie begins, and Holden hates it. The description becomes Salinger's most aggressive takedown of consumer culture. It's about a prince who gets amnesia and falls in love with a commoner, and then he gets hit on the head and his memory returns. He tries to go back to his princely life, but he can't abandon his true love. Holden's one-sentence review is, quote, "All I can say is, don't see it if you don't want to puke all over yourself," end quote. It's hard to read the description of the movie and not notice the significant contrast between Hollywood fluff and Catcher in the Rye. In spending so much time describing the movie, Salinger is really pointing out the unique nature of his own novel. Catcher in the Rye is way more complex, thoughtful, and evocative than the stupid movie Holden's watching, and we start to realize the difference between authentic, meaningful art like the novel and something silly and disposable like the movie. The other thing that bothers Holden is a woman who is crying next to him in the theater. She's really affected by the silly movie. What's frustrating is that she's mean to her son the whole time. Holden can't help but be bothered that she can be so empathetic toward a phony film, but so cruel toward the people that she should actually care about. Put another way, shut down your Instagram and hug your parents. In keeping with the artistic theme of this chapter, Holden begins to remember a conversation between his two brothers, Allie and DB. DB was in the military, and Allie once asked him who was the better war poet, Emily Dickinson or Rupert Brooke. DB insists Allie look at their poems written on his baseball mitt and answer the question for himself. Allie answers Emily Dickinson, and DB tells him that is correct. This is a fun detail for several reasons. First, Brooke is a war poet. He wrote idealistic sonnets about war being noble. Emily Dickinson, on the other hand, never got anywhere near a war. In fact, she was almost a complete shut-in, oftentimes afraid to leave her room. It's a condition called agoraphobia. So Allie was asking who was the better war poet or a shut-in. Both Allie and DB decide it was the shut-in. Translation: real life can sometimes be more like a war than actual war. The second reason this is clever is that Salinger is, in fact, a war writer himself. Legend has it he stormed the beaches of Normandy with chapters of Catcher in the Rye tucked into his uniform. Whether that's true or not, he did see many terrible battles, and he liberated a gruesome concentration camp. As a result of his experiences, he suffered from significant post-traumatic stress. Follow me here if you can. Salinger is a war author, yet he's best known for writing about high school-aged angst. Isn't it ironic that our preeminent scholar on the struggles of being a teenager was able to write about it so beautifully because he was actively suffering from depression and shell shock? He'd been through the greatest war ever and had terrible experiences throughout it. Translation: the biggest war of all is high school, and like Emily Dickinson, anyone who survives it is themselves a war poet. Keep surviving, my friend, and get to class.